How's it going, everybody? It's DeathGiver here, bringing you another Pokemon TCG video. This is going to be an update to a video I did a month ago on my Charizard deck. This will be since the Paradox Rift release, since that one was done before. Kind of some changes that I've done with the deck. The deck has been flowing really well. I've been winning a lot of battles with it, so I want to do an update just in case you guys wanted to try the deck out. It's a pretty fun deck. It's got very good draw power for a Charizard deck, and it wins probably about 80 to 90% of the time. It's beaten a lot of stuff. If you check out some of my more recent videos, you'll see that it flows really well. So let's get started. Hopefully this won't be a 32-minute video like the last one was. I don't plan on it being that long, but let's get started so it won't be. Alright, first up, obviously you need Charmander. Charmander is self-explanatory. He goes into Charizard, so I won't spend too much time on him. Just like with Pidgey, same thing with him. He goes into Pidgeot. Not gonna spend too much time on him. But I run 2 Pidgeys and 4 Charmanders, so that's pretty much been the best run to go, especially with Charmander. Because there's been times where like 2 to 3 has been a prize card, so you definitely, Charizard is the engine of the deck. You definitely want to make sure that you have Charmander going. Pidgeot is the glue to the deck. His quick search ability allows you to go in and get any card from your deck. It's great for the plays that you'll be needing early game for rare candies, mid game for Arvens and rare candies, and trying to get out a second Charizard, and then end game you're wanting to go get boss's orders with the quick search ability, so you can just start targeting your opponent's Pokemon and taking them out and getting your prize cards to finish the match. Jirachi is a card that you probably won't use in most matches, but when you need him, he's great for it. His Stellar Veil prevents all damage counters from being placed on your bench Pokemon by effects of opponent's basic Pokemon. It's great against Iron Valiant decks, and that's pretty much about what I've seen that it's good for. He's also a good discard fodder if it's a match that you don't need. So, but it's better for him to be in the deck and you not need him than for him not to be in the deck and you need him. I run 1 Charmeleon. He's been great, especially when I've had to go up against MEW, where my EX Pokemon like Pidgeot and my V Pokemon like Entei and my EX, of course, like Charizard can't damage it. Charmeleon still does 90 damage and he can one-shot MEW. He's been good against the Serena decks as well, because it gives me ability to where I can go up to Charizard when Serena uses her special ability. So Charmeleon's been good. I only run 1. I don't really like to go to a whole full evolution tree because it just makes it to where it takes too long. Going Charmander, Charmeleon to Charizard, that's just more turns that you're wasting, where it's better to get Charizard out early. Lumineon is great for in a pinch. It gets you a supporter card that you need. Most of the time with Lumineon, I'm going for Iono, I'm going for Arven. Sometimes I might go for Boss's Order if Pidgeot's been taken out and it's late game and I just need one more knockout. But Lumineon is a great in a pinch Pokemon card to have. You want to try to keep it off the field because it is a very easy one prizer to knock out. I mean, almost every deck can knock this out in one shot. So you want to get it to the bench and then you want to remove it with Professor Turo's or some card like that. But it's a great card, especially in the pinch. Entei. A lot of people don't run Entei in the Charizard deck. I'm not sure why. Early game, Entei is great. His fleet-footed ability allows you to draw a card, which is just fantastic, especially early game. And also early game, Entei has the ability to do 220 damage. Early game, that is great. It's going to put some damage on the bigger Pokemon. It's going to knock out the weaker Pokemon. So he can get you off to a great start early on. And he only takes 2 energy to get going. And also, if he's out there when Charizard hits the field, Charizard can feed energy into him, get him going, and then when he gets knocked out, Charizard is powered up to 240 attack damage, and now you got a bigger mon coming out doing more damage. So I'm not sure why Entei doesn't get used in this deck more. I've seen a lot of tournament decks that don't run him. I think it would be better to run him, but I see when it comes to like some of the cards that they run instead of him, which I'll go over. But I definitely think Entei is definitely the way to go. And like I said, early game, you want him out. Charizard, star of the deck. his damage ramps up as your opponent takes more prize cards. Like I said, my favorite play is to start out with Entei, because Charizard only does 180 when he first hits the field. So I like to start out with Entei, watch Entei get knocked out, and then Charizard automatically goes up to 240. And at that point, he is most of the time doing either a lot of damage or he's not one-shotting something. So he becomes a beast once Entei goes down, or once your opponent starts taking prize cards. And then, of course, late game, they're down to 2 prize cards. He's almost one-shotting everything. He's doing 300 damage. So Charizard is a great card. I used to joke with my friend Bolt Up, shout out to Bolt Up, that he was a tier B deck, but I really think that this deck is pretty high just because of this card and the fact that in late games, it's Manaphy is self-explanatory. Again, he's like Jirachi. He is definitely going up against Radiant Greninja. He protects against Radiant Greninja, which is out there a lot, especially in the Chi and PAL decks that are out there. He protects your bench from opponents' attacks. He's great, like I said, for Radiant Greninja. He's another card that you definitely want him in your deck when you need him. You don't want to be without him when you don't. And then Radiant Charizard is the last card in my deck that I use. I used to have an argument with Bolt that Radiant Charizard was overused and pretty much overpopulated, and it was just it wasn't the card that everybody was bringing it out to be. But since playing the deck a lot more, I have definitely seen the error of my ways with this card. Late game, this card is great. It takes it to where you only need 1 fire energy and you can do 250 damage, which one-shots a lot of stuff, and he's only a 1 prizer. So when it gets down to where my opponent needs 2 prizers and I need 1, or I need 2 and 250 can do it for me, I can throw him out there with 1 fire energy and I can one-shot whatever it is and usually win a duel. So it's a great card. I don't use it a lot, and I don't like to put it on my bench a lot as well, because early game or even late game, when I've used up all my energy and put it on Charizard and Entei and everything like that, I usually don't have 3 retreat costs to be able to do for Charizard. So he is definitely something you don't want to have on the bench late game if you've already got it wrapped up. There's been a couple times where my opponent bossed Radiant Charizard, and then I'm like, all right, I'm stuck with this thing until I can get rid of it. Most of the time, I've already used up my escape rope, and I've already used up all my energy, so this guy is out there until they take him out, or until they're ready to boss something and take that out. So I don't recommend having him on the bench unless you're throwing him on the bench to use him in the next couple turns. Other than that, I would pretty much leave him in your hand. Okay, so now we're going to move on to some honorable mentions that I've seen in tournament decks that I see why they're in the deck. I personally don't run them, but I will see why they're in the deck. The first one is Pidgeot V. I love his special ability, which is Vanishing Wings, which once during your turn, if this Pokemon is on your bench, you can shuffle it all and all attached cards back into your deck. I think that's a great ability. And for late game, I think it's actually perfect. I would even take it over Entei for late game. Like I said, Entei is better early game. Pidgeot V is better late game. The ability to be able to remove itself and put itself into the deck and not to your hand is just fantastic, especially when you don't want to give out an easy 2 prizer where they can boss and 2 prize it. So it's easy to go back into your deck, protect yourself, and it's perfect for Forest Seal Stone. So you slap this bad boy down on the bench, Forest Seal, use the ability, and then slap it back into your deck. It's good to go. And then if you see it again, slap it back into your deck again, so it doesn't give your opponent an easy 2 prizer. The only thing that I say, then the reason why I don't run this card and I wouldn't run this card, especially with Entei, Entei gives me another attacker, where with this card, your only attacker is Charizard. And I know a lot of people are like, well, duh, you want Charizard to be your only attacker. But it also makes it to where, for me in my deck, I have 5 attackers I can use, where with the traditional Charizard deck, they only got 3. So I prefer to have the Entei over the Pidgeot for that reason as well. But Pidgeot is a great card to have just to put in the deck, but again, personally, I don't run. The other one is Rotom V. I've seen this card pop up in a lot of tournament decks. Again, this one is another one that is a great card. It's got the ability Instant Charge, which once during your turn, you may draw 3 cards. If you use this ability, you end your turn. The card is great early game. If you have this on your bench, I think you can use this on your bench. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to use this on your bench. But if you can use it on your bench, or if it's in the active spot and you're able to draw a card or draw 3 cards, that is great early game. Because a lot of times with the Charizard deck, if I get 3 cards, one of those 3 cards, more than likely one of those 3 cards are going to be cards I can use. So I think it's a great ability. The only problem is it ends your turn. I don't like that, especially late game when you're trying to win the match. You're not going to use this ability. Where late game, you're still able to use Entei's ability. So, and still be able to attack and try to win the game. So I think it's a great card early on. I see why people run it, but I personally don't want to use it for the drawback that if this thing comes out late game, 1, you can't attack with it because you need electric energy, and I'm not running that in my deck. And 2, it's going to be an ability that you're not going to want to use because at that point, you're wanting to do other stuff than draw 3 cards and end your turn. So that's the Pokemon. And then for the trainers, I'm not going to go over every trainer card because they're pretty much the same as my last deck. Obviously, you run Super Rod. 4 Seal Stone is great for Entei. To use Entei and Lumineon. And it allows you to get 1 card from your deck. So I would definitely recommend that. I run 2 of them. You can only use 1, but I don't want it to be a prize card. If it is, then it can be a problem. So I run 2. And then if I have both of them in my deck, I Arven it out, and then I use it as a discard for Ultra Ball or Lost Vacuum to get rid of something off the field. So I definitely recommend 4 Seal Stone. Avery was a card that I added to my deck. I think I'm the only one that I've seen to run Avery in the Charizard deck. Reason why I run Avery is because it allows me to draw 3 cards. Most situations, those 3 cards is all I need. I did used to run 3 Iono, but I run 2 Iono and 1 Avery just because Iono for the most times in late game, if I'm up and I only got 2 prize cards left, and Iono, I'm only getting 2 cards back. So I'd rather add 3 cards to my hand than lose cards and then only get 2 back. So that's why I run Avery. Also, Avery is great because it makes it to where your opponent, if they have 5 Pokemon on their bench, they have to get rid of 2 of them. And there's a lot of decks out there that they need their bench. So to force them to have to pick 2 Pokemon to get rid of is huge, especially with Iron Valiant because they're wanting to switch all the time, especially with Lost Zone because they're wanting to run 4 Comfies and Sableye and Cramp, the duck thingy that does 110 damage. Like, they want their bench to be full. Chi-Pal's another one that wants their bench to be full. So to make them get rid of 2 Pokemon off their bench is just huge. And so that's why I run Avery. Nest Ball is self-explanatory, allows you to get a basic Pokemon. The other one I wanted to go over was Professor Turo's Scenario. I added this card because it allows me to get Lumineon off my field and allows me to get damaged Pokemon off my field. I did run, I think the name of the card was Penny, which allowed you to get a basic Pokemon off your bench, but I found that Penny was great for removing Lumineon and Entei, but when I had a Charizard that had 300 damage on it, and I really didn't want it to be knocked out, Professor Turo's was the better play to go with, especially if I want to get rid of Charizard, if I want to get rid of Pidgeot late game, if I think that my opponent's got the ability to be able to boss Pidgeot the next turn and win, I'll get him off the bench so I can get him to my hand. So Professor Turo's is the new card that I'm running in my deck instead of Penny. I like this card a lot. It has saved me quite a few times, and it has thwarted my opponent's plan to try to get 2 prize cards quite a few times. So it's definitely a great card, and I definitely will be running it for a while going forward. The other card that I added to my deck, I replaced 1 Lost City, and I added Collapsed Stadium. Again, this one is one of those where my deck doesn't need as big of a bench as other decks. Pretty much all I really need is an Entei in the starting spot, Pidgeot, 2 Charizards, and either a Manaphy or a Jirachi, or neither one. So I only need 3 to 4 spots at most. I don't really run 4 to 5. If I get 5, it's fine, but like I said, a lot of my opponents, they really need all 5 of their spots. So to make them collapse down and get rid of one of their Pokemon that they may or may not need, is huge. I've seen it come in clutch a lot, especially again versus Iron Valiant, GM PAL, Lost Zone. So it's definitely a card I run. My friend, again, Bolt Up, another shout out to him. He disagrees with me. He thinks I should run two Lost Zones and call it, but I think Collapsed Stadium is the better way to go for most matches. Lost Zone has its perks, but I think Collapsed Stadium for my deck is a little bit better. And then Vitality Band. I run this one. I know there's Defiant Band, and that one does 30 damage, but the one thing about what you'll find with this deck, if you run this deck, if you test it out yourselves, is that you're ahead a lot. There's not a lot of times where you're behind. You're going to be ahead a lot in the match, and you don't want cards that are like, if you're behind, it does this. Because if you're in a match and your deck is going, most of the time you're ahead. And that if you're behind, it does this. Well, if I'm not behind, it's not doing anything. So I prefer to run Vitality Band. It does 10 extra damage against Serena. When Charizard when I got down to 2 prize cards and I slapped this on Charizard was able to one-shot Serena and win me the match. Actually, was able to one-shot Serena twice and was able to win me the match. That 10 extra damage is huge because with Charizard, he stops at 210, so that 220 is big against Pokemon with the 220 HP. He stops at 240, so it boosts him up to 250, which takes out a lot of stuff. And then, like I said, the 300 boosts him up 310, which takes out a lot of stuff. So it makes it to where he is very able to one-shot a lot of Pokemon. Even the one where he's now able to one-shot Pidgeot if I have this. If you take 3 prize cards, because he gets to 270 attack. With this on, he goes to 280. I now can one-shot a Pidgeot, so I can also take that out. And I don't have to worry about hit going 2 turns, because with Pidgeot, he has free retreat. And if I do the damage, and even though he only has 10 left, my opponent gets to free retreat him next turn. Well, now I get to one-shot him. So I definitely recommend this one over some of the other tools. I tested all the other tools. I didn't too much care for them. This one I feel like has been the best one for me. It's only 10 damage, but it's a solid card, and it's a 10 damage at any time. If I'm ahead, if I'm behind, if I'm tied, I got that 10 damage. Honorable mention, I did run Beach Court. I ended up going back to Lost Zone just because Beach Court, I felt, helped my opponent a lot more than it helped me once it got to the late game. Once Charizard hits the field, this card is no longer any good. And most decks now, like Roaring Moon and Iron Valiant, they run all basic Pokemon. So that makes it to where they get to retreat for free or retreat for one less. And I'm stuck with Charizard still out on the field. It's great for Lumineon if I want to get him out. It's great early game if I want to get Pidgey or Charmander off the field. It's also great for retreating out an injured Entei, but for the most part, it didn't work as well as I thought it would. And a lot of times, like I said, it was helping my opponent more than it was helping me. So I removed it and put in another Lost Zone. Thought about running 2 Collapsed Stadiums, but I kind of want a little bit of variety in my deck just in case for different situations. So that's why I run the Beach Court and the Lost Zone, or not Beach Court, the Lost Zone and the Collapsed Stadium. But Beach Court is not a bad card. If you don't have any Lost Zones at this time and you have Beach Court, it's a great card to throw in the deck as well. It does work. It just doesn't work most of the time, and like I said, it helps out the opponent. Another card that I saw a lot of in the deck, I personally don't run it, but Counter Catcher. I see the draw to it. I think it's a great card, and I would love to run it. But the problem is this card can only be used if I have more prize cards left than my opponent. And like I was saying earlier, most of the time I don't have more prize cards left than my opponent. My opponent's gonna have more prize cards left than me, which means that 80 to 90% of the time it's dead in my hand. It's an item card that allows you to switch your opponent's Pokemon. I love that. It's better than Boss for that reason, because Boss, when you use it, uses up your supporter use, and that means you can't use Arven, you can't use Iono, you can't use Avery, where Counter Catcher allows you to continue to still be able to do that. But again, like I said, the problem is it's saying from when you're behind, and most of the time you're not behind with this deck. Most of the time you're ahead with this deck, so I would rather just run 3 bosses than 2 bosses in the Counter Catcher. Again, if you run this deck and you decide you want to use this, let me know what you think, and if it does actually work better. Like I said, the few times that I use it, it just ended up turning to be a dead card in my hand. But if you have better experience, hey, let me know about it. I would love to hear how it went for you, but myself, I do not run this card. And then last but is 8 energy. There's not really much to say about the 8 energy. They're just the engine that makes Charizard and Entei go. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to help support it. And I'll see you next time.